Hey friends, welcome back to This Homemade Life for another Fun Food Friday. This week I am featuring Texas sheet cake. So this is my husband's favorite cake, and I have now made it twice this year for him because I just figured out what kind of cake it was that he liked. And I wanted to share it with you guys in this new series I'm doing called Fun Food Fridays. I think this is my second one. I'm trying to put out at least 2 a month, maybe 3. I don't always do fun foods every week, but it's a great place for me to share desserts and snacks and things like that don't necessarily fit into my what's for dinner videos. So for Texas sheet cake, this cake is really something else. Now, I will be honest and say I'm not a cake person. I don't really like the texture of cake, but I love some icing, and this has some of the best icing I have ever had in my whole life. So I started off by mixing all the cake ingredients together. First, the dry ingredients, that's 2 cups of flour, 2 cups of sugar, a teaspoon of baking soda, and a half a teaspoon of salt. I went a little shy on the salt because I have to use salted butter. That's all I buy is salted butter. The recipe calls for unsalted. So I did go a little shy on the salt. And as you can see, your girl has pulled out the measuring cups and the measuring spoons, something you guys will rarely see on my channel because you know I just don't like to measure things. I love the freedom of just creating and things like that, seasoning with my heart, all that kind of stuff. I feel really restricted when I have to measure because I feel like I'm not getting to be creative in the kitchen. It's one reason I don't bake all that often, but for cakes and all that, to get it to bake properly, be the right consistency, you got to measure. So here I am. I did mix together a half a cup of buttermilk, 2 large eggs, and a teaspoon of vanilla. Yeah, I seasoned the vanilla with my heart. I just poured it on in. I don't think you can have too much vanilla, do you? Once I whisked all that together, I headed on over to the stovetop for part 3 of just the cake itself. We are going to melt together 2 sticks of butter. I know it's a lot. I know, just roll with me on it. This cake is definitely not healthy. It is not low fat, but it is rich, decadent, and delicious. So to the 2 sticks of butter, we're going to add in 1 cup of water, and we're going to let that, kind of start to come together, and then put in 4 tablespoons of cocoa powder. Be sure you pull out your whisk for this one. You want to make sure that the cocoa powder incorporates really, really well into the liquids here. And sometimes, cocoa powder is super powdery. It doesn't always want to mix into liquids well. For whatever reason, heating it up does definitely seem to help. It did come together much better than I would have expected. But like I said, just be prepared to whisk. We're just going to kind of cook this for a little bit on the stovetop. Now, I did this after I mixed everything else together, which was not wise. You should really start off with this one so that it has time to cool down while you mix your dry and wet ingredients together. That way, when you mix everything together at the end, you don't scramble your eggs. I had to try to let mine cool off a little bit, and my eggs didn't scramble. It was okay, but definitely start with this step just so it has time to cool down a little bit. So this Texas sheet cake is, like I said, my husband's favorite. He told me when he was growing up, his grandmother would always make this chocolate cake for him, and he just loved it. But he didn't have the recipe, and he just kept calling it chocolate cake. And the more he talked about it, the more I started to wonder if it's a Texas sheet cake. Lo and behold, years later, I finally decided to try making one, and it is a Texas sheet cake. That is what she used to make for him. So he's so happy that I have figured it out for him. This is the second time I've made it. I don't really like to eat cake, so I don't very often bake it. I have baked cakes in the past for people's birthdays and stuff, but that's pretty much it. I don't just bake them on a random Tuesday just because I don't like to eat them. But for my husband, I love him, and for Father's Day and his birthday, I'm more than happy to hop in here and make a Texas sheet cake. Now, why is it called a Texas sheet cake? I did have to look this up because I was really curious. I'm like, well, did it just come from the state of Texas? What is it? So there's really no definitive answer. One source said that it was first listed in a Texas newspaper. That's where the recipe was first shared. So it's called a Texas sheet cake because it was from a Texas newspaper. Other people say it's because the cake is so big. It's like Texas size because everything's bigger down here in Texas. That one makes more sense to me because this is a pretty good sized cake. I use a roasting pan, jelly roll pan, all that kind of stuff. A big pan, whatever you have. You can use any of those that's oversized. So your cake is pretty thin and it's pretty big. To me, it's Texas sized. I always just thought, because people talk about sheet pans and stuff, and it was a big cake. That's why it's a Texas sheet cake. But I don't know. And apparently Google's not certain about it either. So anyway, once I let that cool off as long as I could, which was not that long because as you can see, it's still pretty steamy, I mixed it into the flour, whisked everything together to try to get all the lumps and clumps out. Then I added in my buttermilk, egg, vanilla mixture and stir, stir, stir. This is a pretty thick batter before you add the egg, so it does take a little bit to really get it to all incorporate together. So just keep stirring. You want to make sure you get as many lumps and clumps out as you possibly can. And then it's like a really nice, creamy, rich batter. And it smells oh so good. I mean, that chocolate, oh wow. My whole house smelled like chocolate. It was great. So then I went ahead and grabbed my big roasting pan. I had sprayed it down with like some cooking spray, Pam, whatever it is you use. I sprayed this down and then I went ahead and poured the cake batter in, and then we're going to pop this in a 350-degree oven for like 15 to 20 minutes. It doesn't take long because it is a thinner cake. Just test it with a toothpick in the center to make sure it is fully done when you pull it out of the oven, and you're good to go. Now here's something that makes this cake definitely different from other cakes. While it's baking, you just jump right into cooking the icing because we're going to ice a hot cake. So I started off with 1 stick of butter. I know, warm butter. So we are 3 sticks deep at this point. That's what makes it so good, all the butter. But to this butter that we are melting, we're going to toss in 6 tablespoons of buttermilk, 1 entire pound of powdered sugar, and 4 tablespoons of cocoa powder. I know it's like a lot of powdered sugar, but trust me, it's so good. It's a different kind of icing. The icing is my favorite part. Like I could literally just eat it from a bowl, and I say that because my husband actually made just the icing for me the other day because that's all I like, and he was trying to do something nice for me, so he just made a batch of the icing. And I kid you not, over the span of like, I don't know, 10 days, I ate icing every single day after dinner. I just got a scoop of icing. It was so good. That's my favorite part of the cake. Turns out one of my kids is exactly like that. They don't particularly care for cake, but they will eat icing for days. My mother, I think, is pretty similar too. She likes the icing, so maybe it's genetics. I don't know. Anyway, I went ahead and let the butter continue to melt, and I stirred and stirred and melted and stirred and stirred and melted some more. This does get kind of lumpy and clumpy, so you want to stay on top of it to make sure you can whisk out as many of the lumps as you can. Now, just be aware, when you add in the powdered sugar, there's still going to be some lumps no matter how much I mixed both times. I just couldn't get rid of all of them, and I think that's the way it's supposed to be because my husband said when he was a kid, those little crispy bits of powdered sugar were his favorite part, so I guess that's just how it is. Anyway, once that's all done, you pull your cake out of the oven and you pour the hot icing over the hot cake. I know it goes against everything we've learned. Everybody always says, oh, you got to cool your cake before you put the icing on. Not with this one. It's great. It's a lot of icing, so it looks like it's pooling up. Don't worry. It's just going to be perfect and delicious. It just kind of is, I don't know, cascading down on top. Now, I am so sad to say I did not film myself actually pouring the icing on the cake, and I would have because like the way it ripples across the top of the cake is so fantastic. I mean, there's just something so satisfying about it, but I wasn't even thinking about it and I didn't film it. Just know you're going to love that moment. And it smells so good. Your house is going to smell amazing. It's going to be so hard to let this cake cool, but you have to. The icing will kind of set a little bit, so you need to let this cool completely down before you slice off a piece. It's going to be hard to wait. My husband had the struggle of a lifetime not being able to just hop in there and grab himself a piece of this cake. He had to let it cool. But it was still so delicious. And as you can see, I'm still stirring and mixing. I added in a little bit of vanilla. Again, I seasoned that with my heart. Make sure you turn off your heat before you add the vanilla in so you don't burn it and scald it and make it bitter. And there's the cake, fresh from the oven with the icing over the top. It is so good and so delicious. There's a little slice. You can see how thin the cake is. And this was what I made for my husband a couple of times. He loved it. It is fantastic. So I hope you guys will love it too. If you have not already, hit all the buttons, like it, subscribe it, and go ahead and comment down below and let me know what you think. As always, I appreciate you guys supporting my channel. Thank you so much. And I will see you soon with another video. Bye.